I'm sure we'll in the future we'll know what's the real circumstances of his death.
Do you believe that Putin is guilty of murder here in Navalny's case?
He's responsible, absolutely. He's responsible for that.
You have said it's short of weapons and personnel, money stalled in Washington. Europe's ability to deliver weapons is also in question. You're not painting a very bright picture.
It's not a very bright picture. I suppose the good news is that all is not lost yet. But look, these are things people have been talking about for months, and they're still talking about them.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Backstory. I'm Dana Lewis. Was Russian opposition figure Alexei Navalny murdered by President Putin? Well, as we say in crime reporting, where I got my journalism start, motive, means, and opportunity add up to the main suspect being Putin. His fingerprints are all over Navalny's death. Motive: Navalny was a threat to Putin's choking, stifling stranglehold on freedom and democracy in Russia. Means: Navalny's wife says it was poisoning. Regardless, the Russians won't release the body for examination. Opportunity: Navalny's been in Putin's care, in Putin's prisons, since returning home in January of 2021, when he had survived an earlier poisoning attempt by the Russian security services. Tragic end that was stunning, but not altogether shocking, as Putin rules now by terrorizing his own citizens. What does Navalny's death mean for the war in Ukraine? Could it reignite American and European commitment to defeating Russian forces in Ukraine? Maybe. And on this backstory, former Prime Minister of Russia, Mikhail Kasyanov, who is now a declared enemy of Putin's state, and the brilliant Olga Oliker from the International Crisis Group on Ukraine. Mikhail Kasyanov is the former Prime Minister of Russia, now labeled by the Kremlin as an enemy of the state, and he is living in exile in Europe. Mikhail, welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, hello. Happy to be in the program again. Thank you.
It is heart-wrenching to hear pleas from Alexei Navalny's mother and his wife asking for the body of Navalny back. In a video released Monday, for instance, Yulia Navalny accused Putin of killing her husband. She says that the refusal to hand over the body is part of a cover-up. Quote, they are cowardly and meanly hiding his body, refusing to give it to his mother, and lying miserably while waiting for the trace of poison to disappear. She suggested that her husband might have been killed with a Novichok-style nerve agent. What would you say about what we're hearing?
Yeah, I think there are a number of aspects why just authorities didn't passing just giving the body to the mother and then the wife. In fact, first we don't know what the circumstances just of his death. Maybe he was poisoned, maybe not. Just that what people, of course, the whole world and of course family first of all would like to know. But the second important issue is that, in fact, authorities quite nervous right now, concerned about just one potential funeral process, because just that will be just actual demonstration. They couldn't prohibit this, but they don't know what to do. That's why just they're keeping the body. They have, by law, they have a right to keep it up to 30 days. And that's what they will definitely will do. Just if they have no decision how to get out of this situation. And of course, if it was poison, if Alexei was poisoned, as I hear from different experts, just just remainers of Novichok or other
chemical agents.
Chemical agent could live more in the body, could more than 30 days, and that's why just maybe there's not a solution. But in any case, they're in shock. They don't know what to do with this. Although, of course, there is no doubt that he was killed. If not directly, it means that he was killed, keeping himself for 3 years in torture conditions, just all these times, yeah. And in fact, that really was a difficult period for Alexei, and they pressing him, just trying to destroy his mental, I would say, strong position, his bravery, etc. But he was very strong, and they bring him to this final end with the death. I'm sure we'll in the future we'll know what's the real circumstances of his death.
Do you believe that Putin is guilty of murder here in Navalny's case?
He's responsible, absolutely. He's responsible for that. First of all, he gave an order to put him in jail, and unlawfully. And in fact, he spent there just 3 years, and within 3 years, just through this torture, he came to death. And that's what absolutely the responsibility of the regime and Putin in just first of all.
So a lot of people don't know, after you left the inner circle of President Putin, because you were the prime minister under Yeltsin, and then when Putin came, you continued on as prime minister for a couple of years. A lot of people don't know that then you just didn't retire. I mean, you launched your own political party, Parnas. You tried to challenge President Putin democratically. You were unable to do so, but at one point you were partnered with Navalny's party, trying to challenge the Kremlin and trying to bring about political change in Russia. What do you remember in your conversations about Navalny that really strike you now, that he has died and in prison?
Yeah, we were just in cooperation just few times here. Once the first when Alexei appeared to be as one of the leaders of the opposition, that was 2011 and 12, just on all our demonstrations in Moscow. Of course, he was a leading person on the streets at that time. And in 2013, my party just nominated him for the elections of mayor of Moscow. And at that time, he got almost 30%, and we all believe that he got even more than that. Yeah. And potentially, if there would be the second voting in the second round, he potentially could win at that time. And then, of course, Navalny became just the one of the most important critics of Putin, and one of the most bright leader of opposition. In 2016, we had the coalition in our elections in federal elections to Duma. Yeah, that was not quite successful, but at least we were in a close cooperation with him and his team. And
what kind of things would he say to you? Like, I mean, knowing the uphill, impossible fight that both of you had taken on, I mean, what kind of things would he say?
Alexei is different from me, for instance, but he is a real politician on the street. He's just the best leader of the street protests, and that is important part of any opposition. In fact, just all changes could come, especially in such country like authoritarian regime like in Russia, or even dictatorship. Of course, without street protests, you cannot have any changes. And now we don't have just Alexei, and he was a real bright leader of the streets. In the past, there was also my friend Boris Nemtsov, who was also killed. And that we lost just two the most important leaders of opposition who could move people and call people, lead people on the streets, which is very important. Without this, we cannot get changes. That's why we have a tragic, dramatic lost in opposition, and this was what is represented by Alexei Navalny. He led this. That's what absolutely clear.
Do you remember anything that he ever said about fighting the Kremlin, about fighting Putin, about?
He always calling just and saying just even from the jail, just call for everyone, do something. don't stop and don't give up on that. Yeah, that's definitely what he did till the end, till the last day of his life. Yeah, he did something, just protests and on all those court discussions which he participated on video just many times. Just he called for people for that. Just don't give up and continue fight. That is I say that he's very bright and I'll say brave person.
I don't think anybody would ever say he's not exceptionally brave. I mean, he was poisoned with Novichok. He was treated in Germany, and he returned back to Russia, knowing very well probably that he would go to jail. And you know,
I didn't. In fact, just I didn't recommend him to. I talked to him 1 month before his coming back to Russia in 2021. Yeah, I talked to him just and recommended him not to come back because the risk of getting to be put in jail just was very high. Although at that time the risk
what
was
did he say?
like 4 years in jail. At that time, but still, it was just very risky, just decision.
And what did he tell you? What did he say?
He didn't answer just directly because just I wanted him to lead my party instead of me. I was prepared on that time, of course, and I talked to people in my party so that in Congress they would vote and would elect him while he would be staying in Germany, but he could be elected as a leader of Parnas, People's Freedom Party, and then on a later stage he could come back as a leader of the party, but not as a popular blogger, as Kremlin and all authorities just calling him just a popular blogger, but to be a leader of political party with the program be very sustainable, just liberal democratic program. Of course, it's important, but I don't know why he came back just in a very short period of time and was immediately put in jail.
Why now? Why would President Putin order his death now?
I think that's clear because Putin eliminated all enemies, and of course, Navalny was enemy for Mr. Putin. Of course, it was.
He could have killed him 3 years ago, or he could have killed him a year ago. Why now?
They didn't want to do this like they did with Prigozhin because it's a little bit different. Prigozhin is Putin's person who betrayed him, but Navalny is different. He's nothing to do to Putin's team or whatever, Putin's circle. Yeah, that's the different things. Yeah.
Is it because the elections are approaching in the spring in March, and the Kremlin just doesn't want to have?
The speculation could be just very lengthy on this, but I think that there was not necessarily just some kind of instructions to kill him now. That could be some kind of as an end of the process, but ended in this period of time. But on the other hand, we can also take into consideration that Putin already likes just demonstrative events, like he killed Prigozhin, so that to create such a feeling among people, so that for everyone could take such an end. And now just we could also think or speculate that the death of Navalny was in the same way to demonstrate to others that despite of any circumstances and any period of time, these people could be eliminated, could be killed. We don't know.
It's setting another fire of fear through Russia.
Exactly.
He is ruling through terror in some ways.
Exactly. That's the fear. That is one of the instruments of Mr. Putin's rule. The whole environment in Russia, this environment of the fear, and people are afraid to protest and to identify themselves as they're against of this regime or against the decisions the regime takes.
Last question to you. We're 2 years since the war began in Ukraine. What is the best reaction that the West can give to the death of Navalny? Obviously, calls for human rights and democracy. We're well beyond that. That the West can't pressure Russia right now on that. Sanctions are not bringing about change within Russia. is supporting Ukraine and the battlefront against Russia, perhaps some of the best change that the West can do in terms of defeating Putin?
Two directions, I guess. One of them, of course, the protecting human rights and continue to demonstrate that human rights is the highest priority for civilized world, for Western countries, of course, and not close eyes for human rights violations taking place in Russia every day. And secondly, of course, just support Ukraine, because just we cannot accept just Putin's behavior. We cannot accept Putin's way of changing the whole world, just the whole world order. He tries to destroy this. It's not acceptable. Of course, he already destroyed just the whole architecture of European security. But what is next? If Ukraine would be defeated by Putin, it means just another threat appears. Putin would try to test Article 5 of NATO Charter. It means one of the smaller NATO countries, which nearby to Russia, could be subject of next aggression. That's what's not possible even to imagine. That's why Ukraine is not just Ukraine. Ukraine fight in Ukraine or support Ukraine. That's fight to keep the order. The European and all G7 countries just would like to keep. They created this system, and as a liberal order, Putin wants to destroy this. We shouldn't allow him to do this.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you very much. Mikhail Kasyanov, thanks so much, sir.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you very much, Dana Lewis. Thank you.
Olga Oliker is the International Crisis Group's Program Director for Europe and Central Asia, and she's just, I think, a terrific voice when it comes to understanding what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. Olga, thanks so much for talking to us again.
Very happy to be back.
Ukraine is emerging from, a disappointing counteroffensive. You have said it's short of weapons and personnel, money stalled in Washington. Europe's ability to deliver weapons is also in question. You're not painting a very bright picture.
It's not a very bright picture. I suppose the good news is that all is not lost yet. But look, these are things people have been talking about for months, and they're still talking about them. And, you can go to places like the Munich Security Conference, and everybody talks this great talk about support for Ukraine, and this war is existential for Europe. But the reality is that the money is very much not where their mouths are.
Some people would say that the Munich Security Conference, because you brought it up, was one of the most disappointing security conferences in memory. That there was a lot of talk, but when you really look at was there any traction on Ukraine, there's a lot of disappointment.
Well, I wasn't there, so I can't give you a personal impression. But I think that, look, we're in a place where Zelensky came to that conference on the heels of signing security assistance deals with the French and the Germans, which in turn followed such a deal with the UK. So what they're doing is making good on G7 commitments that they made on the sidelines of the Vilnius NATO summit, which are that we're going to sign deals with Ukraine that promise that we will continue to provide support of the sort we are providing. And I think they mean it, right? They will. They really do see this as crucial to their security. The problem is that it's the United States that has had the easiest logistical time of it, providing more weapons. And the United States has pretty much stopped doing that because of domestic politics. And what the UK and France and Germany and Sweden and the Czech Republic and all of the rest of them can do is simply more limited. Now, they could still do more, right? I think the big gap in Europe has been an unwillingness to sign the long-term contracts that European firms want in order to produce the kind of weaponry that the governments want them to produce. So they could do that. But it takes time, right? It's not push a button and ammunition starts to come off the assembly line.
Precisely. So has time slipped away? I mean, we're 2 years into this, and they're still talking about, revving up assembly lines and doing more to provide what the U.S. is not providing?
So this has been, I think, a huge gap for the Europeans. And it's not an absence of capacity, right? European firms can do this. What they need is the contracts. And yes, a certain amount of time has slipped away. And I think a lot of it is about expecting the United States to continue to fill the gap. But the United States hasn't, right? Because a small group of congressional Republicans has been able to be disproportionately influential and prevent the money and therefore the guns from flowing.
So is President Trump helping right now? Former President Trump, suggesting that, his country will not protect NATO member states if they fail to meet the spending minimums, and that he's even said he would invite Russia to attack NATO member states. So surely he's helping people get serious, as ludicrous as some of his comments may be.
So look, the commitments to spend more on defense on the part of the NATO members were made at Vilnius. They were made before Vilnius. They keep getting more and more commitment-y. They also are spending more. Another commitment they made was to spend, I believe, 20% of their defense budgets on defense industry. That would be a good one to move along, I don't know, about a year ago, but we'll settle for now. So look, does Donald Trump help? In a kind of perverse way, he does, because he drives home the point that this isn't perhaps an aberration, that the United States maybe isn't as reliable as you'd like it to be. And if indeed, Europe, this is a war for your security, for your existential, for your existence as Europe, then you need to think about what to do if the United States isn't fully reliable. And of course, during the 4 years of Donald Trump's presidency, this was something that occurred to everybody, but then that presidency ended and they all breathed a giant sigh of relief. And now they're starting to get serious again. And, it's, I think, watching, well, from the inside, I'm sitting here in Brussels, but watching not as a European, but as an American, it's frustrating. But it's a very slow process. The problem is Ukraine does not have a ton of time.
They certainly don't. Do you think that the front lines in Ukraine, given what we've just seen in Avdiivka, and there's a lot of different pictures that were painted on the retreat. Some say it was an orderly retreat. Mm-hmm. Some of the stuff I've read is that it was pretty chaotic, and a lot of Ukrainians died in that retreat. Do you think the front lines are beginning to collapse in Ukraine, that it is that critical? Or what's your analysis?
Look, Ukraine is moving to a defensive footing, which it needs to do. It needs to do that for several reasons. One is pushing the counteroffensive didn't work. Two is they're low on weapons, and a defensive position basically just uses less ammunition than trying to be on the offense. They also need to build up their force size. They need to mobilize and train more people, as well as get more weapons into the stockpile. So all of those call for shifting to defensive positions. Some of that means falling back and getting two positions that are defensive. Now, you can do that in a very organized, thought out way, but there's no way to do that without looking like you're retreating. You are retreating. As it happens, they're doing it under Russian fire as they're being forced back by Russians, taking generally small amounts of territory, but the Russians are taking that territory and they're pushing the Ukrainians back. In terms of what happened in Avdiivka specifically, yes, you're absolutely going to get all sorts of stories. I think the bottom line is there was not a way for the Ukrainians to hold it. Whether they could have done a better job on the retreat, you could always do a better job.
Do you think it's the first in a series? Do you think that we should understand there's going to be more Avdiivkas?
So Russia is pushing pretty much all along the line of contact, and Ukraine has to determine what it can defend and where it wants to dig in and how it wants to get to those positions. And then from that point, it can see what it can do, whether it's launching offensive actions where possible, and when that's possible, I don't know. But I think right now we are seeing the Russians continue to push forward.
Do you think that some of this plays into the replacement of Ukraine's top general, Zaluzhny, that he and Zelensky just didn't see eye to eye. Zelensky was pushing offensive operations. Zaluzhny was reportedly just saying that they were in a stalemate, months before Zelensky actually acknowledged it, and that he had a different vision of where the war was going. And it may be that Zaluzhny was spot on versus Zelensky, who was always campaigning for more Western support, always painting a picture of an optimistic picture, that maybe some of that replacement of Zaluzhny was rooted in some stark realities.
Look, I don't like the term stalemate for this conflict because I think of it in chess terms, and in chess terms, it's the end of the game, and we're not at the end of the game. We are at a place where the Ukrainians were unable to move forward, and the Russians now are moving forward, but tiny amounts of territory with tremendous losses. This is a fight that favors defense. So, that's just kind of what it is. I think the very public fight between Zaluzhny and Zelensky is a breakdown of civil military relations and a reflection of the problem with civil military relations in Ukraine, which is a longstanding one. But I also don't know, it's not that I think Zaluzhny would have somehow prevented the Russians from taking Avdiivka, right? And I try not to be an armchair warrior that questions the decisions made by people who have more information than I do and who are actually responsible for the lives of the people under their command. These are very tough. These are very tough choices, and war is unpredictable.
What would you say about Ukraine's manpower situation? I mean, and I know you've covered it in some of your material from the International Crisis Group, and some of your experts have talked about it. I mean, I was struck by one of the sessions that you did, where they said, a lot of the guys in the front line, they've been there 2 years. I mean, 2 years in some of the worst conditions since World War II, serving in the army, very few breaks. They're tired. They're worn out. The average age, according to one of your experts, is on the front line is 43 years old. Did I get that right?
So Ukraine made a conscious decision not to mobilize young people. They mobilized people with prior military experience and just prior experience in general. So you get an older fighting force. And as one Ukrainian official pointed out to me, you also get people who don't run as fast, right? Or as long. You get people who, but you also get people with experience, and you're not drawing down your young men. And it is predominantly men. One of the things they are looking at doing now is mobilizing younger people. The big challenge for Ukraine is fixing a mobilization system so that people feel confident coming in and joining this force. Ukrainians, if you look at the public opinion polls, they support this war, right? It's a war for their very survival. They get it. But the reports you hear from soldiers are that it's not clear where you're going to be assigned when you're mobilized, that it's not clear what the rotation is, if there is a rotation. So if they can fix that, they're probably going to get at least somewhat better responses. When people get mobilization notices, they're going to be more likely to show up. Okay. But Ukraine hasn't run out of people it could mobilize, but it has to make decisions to actually mobilize them. And it needs to set up a system that doesn't punish them and their families for responding.
The assistance piece, as you've referred to it, and even if the U.S. can unclog its very difficult politics in Washington, and there's no sign of that. That right now, essentially, the U.S. works on sending needed equipment to Ukraine using existing stocks and then new procurements. Do I get it right that the existing stocks are dwindling to the point that the Department of Defense is not comfortable sending any more, and that the new stocks are several years in a pipeline, even if you direct the money to commission those new weapons?
So, as you said, there's two pots of weapons from for which the U.S. is drawing. One is stockpiles. And what the U.S. has liked to do is send Ukraine stuff as they replenish. They don't have the supplemental. If they don't have the funding to replenish, they don't want to keep sending the stockpiles because then the U.S. doesn't have a stockpile anymore, right? So that's kind of the first pot, the first bucket. The second,
and that's one of the most critical ones because that arrives quickly.
Exactly.
Take that out of a warehouse, push it on a plane, and get it rolling.
That's stuff that exists.
Yeah.
The other piece of this is procurement, and those are contracts. And different things take different amounts of time to build on contracts. Some things take 6 months, some things take 2 years. So there are things that have been contracted for that Ukraine is going to keep receiving, right? Because they are being built, right? Whichever defense firm got the order is assembling whatever it is, and it is going to get shipped when it's finished. But with no new contracts, you're not going to get more of this stuff. And that's the problem with that. So on the one hand, you don't have the replenishment of U.S. stockpiles, and on the other, you don't have the money to just buy new things that the defense industrial firms, which are, they're American firms. It's American jobs. It's money to American towns and cities, but they're not producing without the contracts.
And even if the log jam is broken in Washington, there's lag time.
There's a lag. There is
commission and manufacture and delivery.
Right. You can't. It's not magical.
Yeah. In the meantime, people are dying. I probably, I left the headline to the last, and it maybe should have been the first thing I asked you about because it also plays into this. But when you look at the death of Alexei Navalny in prison in Russia, they still haven't turned over the body. There are all sorts of demands for that. Now they're saying it could be 2 weeks before they do that, and lots of questions about why they don't want to do that. Do you think what is the fallout from it in terms of does it play in the West in such an alarming way of how brutal and nasty this regime is in Russia that may provide some new impetus to people saying Putin's got to be dealt with. We've got to get behind Ukraine because that's the last line of defense.
Look, I think it certainly lends strength to that argument, right? The answer to the question, what do you do about this, is support Ukraine. I also will say that I don't know a Russian citizen who isn't wrecked, who has not been wrecked since Friday. And I think it's important to understand it that for Russians who have a different vision for their country, this is a kick in the ribs to somebody who's bleeding out from having been brutally beaten anyway. Right? And it's an effort to tell all of those people, give up. There is no hope for a different Russia. This is the Russia. And you're seeing that community or that set of communities grapple with that situation. But I think for the rest of us, for Americans and Europeans, it really does have to be about either supporting Ukraine or figuring out how you're going to deal with the consequences if you don't.
Olga, thank you so much for your time. Olga from the International Crisis Group. It's always a privilege to talk to you. I think you're terrific, and your organization has such great insights on what's been taking place. So I thank you so much for sharing some of your wisdom with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
And that's our backstory this week. As we speak, news emerged: a Russian helicopter pilot who defected to Ukraine, murdered in Spain. Putin security services likely suspects. He was shot 12 times under a bridge. Revelations: a so-called informant for the FBI trying to frame President Biden and his son was connected to Russian intelligence. The accusations against the Bidens false. More election meddling in America. And candidate Trump failed to condemn or blame Putin. He never wants to confront Russia. Wonder why? And many people wonder about that. Thanks for listening to Backstory. I'm Dana Lewis, and I'll talk to you again soon.